also known as, I guess, lover of all things Snorlax. So this is part two of the tutorials for recreating or basically just explaining the Sudoku game that I built in RPG Maker MZ. And, I posted previously a couple versions of demos highlighting that. If you have not watched part one, I would encourage you to do that. If you have not watched the demo, earlier demo that I posted a while back, I would do that as well. They're pretty quick just to see what it actually, what it looks like in the playtest. So I would encourage you to watch the demo. I'd encourage you to watch part one. And this video is just going to pick up from this part two video is going to pick up where part one left off. I already highlighted the switches, the variables, the common events, and I explained the event that kicks everything off. This puzzle switch event that is basically kicking everything off. Talked about how the map is made using just mapping things, and then I explained how basically there's rows, there's columns. This is a group. This will be important because we'll see some things about how we're checking for errors in the puzzle, and also just to refresh your memory. Again, hopefully you watched part one. But when I built this, I built it in by groups. So this square of the puzzle is essentially S11, S1-1, S1-2, 1-3, 1-4. This is 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, etc. So that becomes important. All right, so again, picking this right back up, I'll throw my disclaimer out there. I am by no means an expert. I don't claim to be. This Sudoku puzzle was made completely through eventing. There's only two plugins that come default with RPG Maker MZ. It is the TextPicture plugin and the ButtonPicture plugin that you would have to add. If you don't know how to do that, I have a tutorial previously that specifically highlights those two plugins. So again, those two, that tutorial focused on, I think I have a couple tutorials on plugins that come default with MZ, and that focuses on what those plugins do and how to use them. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I also showed how to add them to your game or to your project. So it's only using two default plugins. Everything else is evented, which is really cool in my opinion. There may be better ways to do this. There probably are better ways to do this. There are probably more efficient ways to do this. But this is the way that I figured out how to do it. This started out as a can I do it sort of thing. And I got to a point where I figured, yeah, I can definitely do this. And then it was just busy work after that. It was just finishing with a lot of copying and pasting, attention to detail, and basically just going through all the steps needed to fill it all out. So it's not overly complex. Once I figured out all the interactions to make the game work, after that it was really just a bunch of attention to detail, busy type of repetitive work, right? Copy pasting and then changing like switch names, variable names, maybe values, picture names. Pixels for coordinates for where pictures show. Okay, so I previously highlighted this puzzle switch. We skipped over the player choosing their hints, and I'm going to skip over that again for now. Just as a quick reminder, in this event, which I already fully explained in part one, when the player is choosing pre-built puzzle 1, pre-built puzzle 2, or pre-built puzzle 3, then whichever one they choose, this script is turning on self switches in these events, event 1 and event 2. So map 30, event 1, self switch A, map 30, event, this is the map that I'm on, event 2, self switch A, True means you're turning a switch on. False meaning you're turning it off. And these are being essentially these switches are being turned on because these two events are set up to run in parallel, but the condition on the first page of the event is it has a condition of self switch A. So by this event turning on those self switches, it triggers these events to start running. So I already fully explained this, except for when the player chooses their own hints. We'll circle back to that probably in the third part. So um, that event, that triggering event, when the player clicks on this switch, it is triggering these two events if they pick puzzle 1, 2, or 3. Puzzle setup and then solve puzzle. So let's look at puzzle setup first. So here's the first page of the event. You can see, oops, sorry. You can see that it is the condition is set as self switch A, which gets turned on through this other event. There, it is a blank image, so the player never knows that this event is there. It is below character, so in theory the player could walk on it, if the player's roaming around. And it is a parallel trigger. So once self switch A is turned on, this event will begin to run. Okay, it'll just run while other things are happening. So what is this event doing? First, set movement route of the player to no actual commands and to repeat. I've highlighted this before in other tutorials. This basically freezes the player in place, so they cannot move their sprite around on the screen. So set movement route of the player, right? Because remember you have choices here, but of the player, there are no movement commands, but it repeats. So it's just going to sit there and it essentially freezes the player in place. So this is on, let's see, I always have to look for this. Is this page 2? Yes, set movement route. So event command, page 2, set movement route. So that's the first thing that happens. We got to freeze the player so the player can't just roam around while this is going on. Then what this does is this first conditional branch, and I'll repeat what I said in part 1. I built this Sudoku puzzle in pieces. So, I started with basically figuring out how to display the puzzle, how to get the white boxes, how to get the numbers, and then, okay, how do I do puzzle 1? And then figured out, oh, wait, if I have a second puzzle, how do I do that? And if I have a third puzzle, how do I do that? And if I want them to choose choices, how do I choose, if I want them to choose hints, how do I do that? So I built this in pieces and kept adding. Um, if you're trying to recreate this, you can just basically do everything I'm showing, and then you can modify from there. This first conditional branch it's checking to see. Now let me take a step back. This event, okay, this event, the puzzle setup, it has to accommodate whether you have selected basically behind the scenes with puzzle 1, puzzle 2, and puzzle 3. Each one of those puzzles has predefined hints. So when the player selects puzzle 1, the puzzle is going to reveal predetermined hints. Same thing with puzzle 2, same thing with puzzle 3. So this event has to know which puzzle the player picked and therefore which hints to reveal. It also has to be able to tell, has the player selected a value for this particular square of the puzzle, the 81 squares of the Sudoku puzzle. Has the player already picked one? So this event, which is running in parallel, and basically it runs over and over and over again. It just quickly goes through the whole event, just over and over and over again really quickly. It has to say for each single square of the puzzle, right? So remember I said this square right here is 1-1. For each square of the puzzle, should it be a white box because the player hasn't, because it's not a hint and the player hasn't selected it yet? Should it be a purple number because it's a predefined hint? Should it be and which puzzle is it? Puzzle one, puzzle two, puzzle three, or should it be a number that the player has input as part of the game? It has to determine that for each of the 81 squares, and then it goes back and does it again and again and again. So that's how this is set up, and it does it box by box. Okay, and as I mentioned, it will go this box, this box, this box, then here, 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 and then it moves to here. So it runs through it that way. Okay, so first thing it does, again, it will depend on which box we're talking about. So for box one, we're going to do box one first. If Sudoku 1-1 is on, that's a switch, right? If that's on, then basically that is telling this event, because this gets turned on through a common event when the player clicks on a box and a common event is called, and then the player does something, or the event does something. So that's how this switch is getting turned on. The player, in this case, had previously interacted with this box. So then what it does is, if the switch is on, then we're going to use that plugin command that I previously highlighted, TextPicture, and what it's going to do is it's going to show the value of the variable, which is actually Sudoku 1-1 as well. That's the variable 601. This is saved. What is saved in this variable is the number that the player input. And then it's going to show that text as a picture number one, and it doesn't use an image because the text itself is the image. And you have to define the pixels where it is going to be, the coordinates where it's going to be shown on the screen. This is actually from the common event. This is actually the same as in the common event for Sudoku 1-1 that I highlighted in part one. So if this switch is on, so first, if this switch is on, then we're going to use the plugin command. So we're going to use this plugin, and again, I highlighted this before, but this is the text we're going to use. The only text in here is show the value of a variable. Show the value of variable 601. And then the plugin requires that the next thing is a blank image. You have to give it a picture number. And I said that my pictures were lined up. So this box is picture one. The next box is picture two. The next box is picture 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I move over to the next group. So picture one, blank image, so that the text will show. Then I had to predefine how am I going to make that number show up in the middle of this box. And I had to figure out what the pixels would be. What would the pixel numbers require to get that number to line up perfectly in that box, and the scale, etc. Okay, so that's what this is doing, and I already highlighted this when I went over the first 81 common events in part one. Then this is the plugin for ButtonPicture. I have previously highlighted this in other tutorials. Have a tutorial specifically for this. And what this is doing is it makes a picture clickable. So this is the plugin name, ButtonPicture, gives a highlight of what it does, right? Now you have to pick a command, but this one only has one. And then it says makes the specified picture clickable, so that the player can click on that picture on that screen. You have to choose two things. You have to give it a picture number, so you have to actually assign it a number, which needs to be consistent with what you did before. And then you have to give it tell it which common event to call. So you have a list of all your common events, and Sudoku 1-1 is the one that needs to be called by this event. Okay, so you have to, once you do this, you have to define, I have to tell it which picture do I want to be clickable, and which common event is it supposed to call when the player clicks on that picture. And again, how do you get to that? If you pull up the event commands, the plugins are page 3, plugin command, and then it looks like this, very similar to what you just saw. You have to select whichever plugin you want, and then go through it from there. Okay? So this, and then there's an else. Okay, so if this switches on, that basically means the player has input a value already before, so you need to show that value in the square, and you have to make it clickable. Why? Because the player can change their mind. This is not a hint. This is a player chosen number. So if the player is doing this Sudoku puzzle and they put an initial number in here, and then they say, you know what, I don't think that's right, I need to change it, they can click on it again and change the picture. Okay, change the number. That's why this still needs to be a clickable picture. The else branch is basically saying if this is not on, right? If this switch is not on, the player has not already chosen a number for this box. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use show picture again, picture 1, but the image is going to be of a white box. And essentially, this is what it looks like in my pictures. All right, so in my images, in my image folder, in MZ, I just went into I don't know, I might have used whatever default stuff comes with my computer. Something, it was certainly not GIMP. It was just I know it's escaping me, but the basic paint or whatever, okay? And I just made a box. I made a box, and I made a white version and a green version and a red version for a different tutorial. I think I made a green and red version for the lock picking one, and then I just made a white version for this. So it's just a box. And then what I had to do was I had to figure out how big does the box have to be to fit perfectly in this square, right? And then I had to figure out where are the X and Y coordinates, right? To make the white box fit perfectly in this square. 96 and 48 just happened to be the ones for me because of the way I made this map. Okay, so if you notice, this is very similar to this, except that instead of no image, there's a white box. But you notice that the pixels are different because the 48 is the same. The 48 because it's basically defining your X and Y coordinates, right? Your X meaning row going across and Y going down. So since both of these are starting in the upper left, 48 means how far down the page it's going. They both are 48. But the X coordinate is different because the white box is going to start here, whereas the number needs to start in the middle. Okay? So that's why it's subtly different. And then it still has to be clickable. So this is the same as this, right? This makes this one clickable. This makes this one clickable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fully explain a couple of these, and then I'm just going to show you that you just do the same thing all the way down the event for all 81 boxes. And there'll be some subtle changes because what this is telling me is that because it starts off here, and if we look at the next one is Sudoku 1-2, so that's actually the second box. So what this is telling me, because even though I made it, this is telling me that this box, 1-1, is not a hint in any of the pre-built puzzles. Puzzle 1, Puzzle 2, Puzzle 3, this is not a hint. It will always be in those three puzzles, whether you pick Puzzle 1, 2, or 3, this 1-1, this box, will either be a white box or a number. That's the only options for this box. because that's the only option that is here in this event. Okay? So that's the first one, covers the first box. So then it goes down here and it says, hey, I got to check box number 1-2, which is the second one. And this one, there are several possibilities. This first part is this one is telling me that this is a hint, this box is a hint for puzzle 1. So there's a conditional branch. It's a conditional branch and it's checking the switch. If Sudoku puzzle 1 is on, so that means the player picked that they want to do puzzle 1, which turned on this switch. If this is on, then it's going to give the variable for this box, Sudoku 1-2. It's going to assign that variable, the value of 2, because that is the hint for that puzzle. It is a predefined hint for puzzle 1. It does the same plugin command as before. Okay, it does the same plugin command as before, but instead of just changing this to a 602, because that's the variable for the second box, it's also using this this text, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember what these are called, but control characters maybe. /C and then a number in brackets, that's changing the color of the text. So this /C and then 30 in brackets, that's turning this value of variable 602 to purple. So you're going to see this for every time there's a hint, you're going to see this /C 30 in the brackets. Okay. And then it has to, because you're using the plugin command TextPicture, it has to have that show picture. And yes, you have to change it to picture 2 because it's the next square. And again, the plugin requires the show picture with no image. And then you have to change your pixels, right? You have to change the coordinates. You notice that 48 stayed the same. Why? Because these squares are the same distance down, y, right? The same y coordinate. But the x value is going to increase because we're moving from left to right. As we go from left to right, the x value is going to increase. Okay, again, these are the pixels. And then it's going to jump to label S13. Now, the reason it's doing that is because it's going to then skip this next part here to get to the next square in the event. So here's an example. You're going to see this a bunch of times in this event, that puzzle 1, this square, Sudoku 1-2, that is a predefined hint. So this event has to identify that and say, oh, the puzzle 1 is on. That means the value of this square has already been determined. It's a 2. I'm going to set this to a 2. And I'm going to show the value of that using the same plugin as before. And I'm going to make sure I have my different location change. And then I'm going to jump to the next section, the next block, S1-3. If this is not on, so if they didn't pick puzzle 1, right, this particular square is not a hint for puzzle 2 or puzzle 3. So then it goes right into that same concept as it did for Sudoku 1-1. It does its conditional branch check. This is essentially a copy and paste of this. So you can copy and paste this, and you can put it down here, but all you have to do is just change the values. Change the conditional statement. You change the conditional branch from Sudoku 1-1 to Sudoku 1-2. So if this switch is on, then this is the same. You just have to update the variable. You update it to 602 because that's the variable that I assigned for this square. And then this one, you just have to change the picture number. It's a 2. You have to make sure you've got the right coordinates, which are up here. Just so happens that they're up here. Because remember, this is a number up here. It's not the white box. And then this is, again, the same as we did before, the button picture. And all you have to do is update the picture number to 2 to match, right, the show picture. And you have to change the common event. So it went from 141 to 142. And that was it. Okay? Else, this is that other option. It's very similar to this, except it's a white box. And yes, your X is a little bit different because the numbers show in the middle of the box, whereas the white boxes start here. Okay, so in this one, if you copied and pasted from the Sudoku 1-1, you're just making sure you change the picture and you change the pixels. And then, of course, you have to make sure you pick the right picture here, update that picture too, and make sure that's 142. And that takes care of the second box. Okay? So then it goes down to the third box, right? So label S1-3, because that's where this was jumping from. It just basically skipped down to here if puzzle 1 is on. So here we have our label, S1-3. Now all of this from here through here is the third square of the puzzle. And what options do we have? Oh, well, look, if Sudoku Puzzle 1 is on, if Sudoku Puzzle 2 is on, that means that the third square of the puzzle is actually a hint for both Puzzle 1 and Puzzle 2. So it has to accommodate that. Did the player pick Puzzle 1? Did the player pick Puzzle 2? And then it has to accommodate for it's not a hint, and the player is able to click it. So this is very similar to basically you can copy and paste from the previous time you saw this, and you just have to update the applicable values. Make sure that if you copied and pasted this from where it said Sudoku Puzzle 1 is on, that's okay, but you got to change the variable, right? This has got to be Sudoku 1-3, and the hint is 1. Right? You have to know you have to have already made your puzzle, right? For this game, for just this purposes, I found some Sudoku puzzles where it had the puzzle and then it had the solution. And I just picked an easy one, a moderate one, and a hard one. And I use that as a template for experimenting with this. So you have to know what the hint is supposed to be. You assign it that value. This is the same, that change the color to purple, but you have to change this variable, 603. So Sudoku 1-3 is the variable 603. This has to be 603. Because it's the third square, you got to update the picture. So show picture is picture number 3, right? No image because the text picture is the image. Make sure you got to update your X and Y coordinates to make sure they're showing properly on the screen. And then, just like we did before, if one of the puzzles is on, you're jumping to label S1-4, right? So it's going to skip all the rest of this and go down to the next square. But if puzzle 1 isn't on, it's going to check, oh, is puzzle 2 on? If Sudoku puzzle 2 switches on, then essentially this and this are the same, except let's see what's different. You have to change this. This stays, well, this is the same, except you got to update the value, right? So the variable is the same, but the value that it's being set to is different for that particular puzzle. This is the same, this is the same, and this is the same. So again, copy and pasting. And then once it's done that, it is not a hint for puzzle 3. So it just goes into the allowing the player to select that square and to input a value, or this event is trying to figure out, has the player already done that? And if not, then it's going to be a white box. So this is the same as it was in the previous 2 squares. If Sudoku 1-3 switch is on, that means the player has already input a value for that square. So this is the same as up here, except it's not colored. This is the same as up here, so it's the same X and Y. This is the same as it was previously in another section, right? But you have to update the picture to 3, common event to 143. And then the else branch, remember, this is the same as this, except you got a white box instead of none, no image. And you got to make sure you change that X value because the white box starts differently than the number. And then this is the same. So it's still picture 3, common event 143. So no matter what's being shown, if you're in this section here, no matter what's being shown in that third square, the player can still click on it to change it. And then it goes down to S1-4. And it is the same for all 81 boxes. It is exactly the same. So in this one, I can tell that because it starts right off with if Sudoku 1-4 is on, that means that the fourth square is not used as a hint in any of the puzzles because it's not built in here. It's not coded in because it's not a hint. So it just does the regular stuff. You can copy and paste this from the previous one and then just make sure change the switch, change the variable, change the picture number, change the X and Y coordinates, because you notice that now we drop down to this row. So the Y changed. It was 48 for the previous 3 squares. Now it's down to 96. And then 108, you're going to notice something. This 108.96, if we go back to the first square, it was also 108. So that makes it a little bit easier because once you do one row, you know what the X coordinates are for the next row because it's going to line up. Okay? And as you're doing a row, the Y coordinates stay the same for that row. So you just have to go back and reference, right? Once you get a box set up right, it helps you with the other boxes. So again, so we're down here, we're making sure we're in a new row here, so we're making sure we change our both our X and we change our Y, and our X is the same as this square up here. And then this was the same as before, but you got to update the picture number and the common event number. And then the else, right, is the same as this. So if you're copying and pasting the whole thing, you got to update the photo, the picture number, and then you got to make sure that your X and Y are correct. And then, of course, update the picture number and the common event if you were copying and pasting this whole thing from above. So then that was the square 1-4. Down here, I can see that it's Sudoku 1-5, so it's the next box. Now, could you put comments in here to separate this out? Absolutely, and it might help you better understand it. Putting comments in to divide the boxes. Whatever works for you. I didn't do that, but you very well could. Put a comment right here to basically let you know that this is starting box 1-5. And then when you get down to down here, right, put in a comment for box 1-6. Sometimes you have the labels, sometimes you don't. Why? Because up here where were we? Yeah, for here, this was not part of any hint. So you don't need jump to label, right? S1-5 because it's gonna check here and it's gonna say, has the player input a value? No, then show a white box and then go right down to check the next section. So sometimes you have these labels and jump to labels and sometimes you don't because you don't need them. So now we get down to Sudoku 1-5 and it's just repeated. We've seen this before, right? If Sudoku Puzzle 1 is on, and this is just making sure that you are updating the values correctly. If Sudoku Puzzle 2 is on, again, same as before, just making sure that you update the values correctly. And then this part here is the same as it was in the previous boxes, allowing whether the player has input a value or whether it's a white box still, and they're both clickable. Okay, it's just copy and pasting and updating. And the hardest part really is just going through and saying, okay, I'm in box one now. And this is, and I'll just mention this again. When I did this, I did this um, one puzzle at a time. So, for instance, I went through and so here's an example. If you didn't have any puzzles originally, right? If you didn't have any puzzles built in that had hints, you're essentially doing this part 81 times because this is what's allowing the player to click on the box and input a value, or it's showing it as a white box. So basically, you have this 81 times. And then once you have that, you could go back and say, okay, now I want to add my first puzzle to it. So I look at my puzzle, I see where my hints are, and I have to go through and I have to insert this for every box where it's a hint for puzzle one. And then I could go through and I could go through the whole event, inserting this copy and paste this, because if puzzle one is on, and then just update my values. And once I went through the whole event doing that, I could then move on to puzzle two. And then I'd go through the whole event. And every time there was a hint, I'd have to insert this part in the appropriate spot. And I would have to update the values, right? What is the actual hint? What's the number is it supposed to be? And so on and so forth. But again, you could just replicate this immediately. You're going to end up with the same puzzle I have, which might not be helpful for you because what you would probably want to do, and because I'll just tell you, testing this sucks because you have to do each puzzle completely to test all the functionality. So what I did again was I found a Sudoku puzzle that was labeled easy. One was medium, one was hard. And I basically downloaded the pictures of them, both the puzzle, where it just shows the hints, and then the solution, and that's what I worked off of. And so that's what I used to determine where my hints go and such like that. And then it's also what I use when I want to test. So when I play the game, I can just take the picture of the solution and then just quickly fill out the puzzle. So anyway, you wouldn't necessarily want to do this exactly the way I did it because you wouldn't have the solution built in, and that might make testing problematic. So again, this is all 81 times. You're just doing this over and over and over again. If you end up with one of these, is puzzle one, two, or three on, you're going to have a jump to label. And at the beginning of the next section, you're going to insert that label. Okay. And then so for the seventh, right? So for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the seventh one here, it's a hint for puzzle one. And now this time it's a hint for puzzle three. So again, you just have to figure out, and you'd have to do this for however many puzzles you made. If you wanted to take the time and do 10 puzzles, you would in theory have 10 switches that you'd have to check. If Sudoku puzzle 1 is on, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, puzzle 4, puzzle 5, all the way up to 10, whatever. Okay? All right. And then, of course, this is always the same. This is going to appear for 81 of these every single time. And you just have to make sure the switch is updated, the variables updated, the pictures updated, the coordinates are updated, the picture number, the common event, right? And then, of course, the picture, the variables for the coordinates. I'm sorry, not variables. The pixels for the coordinates, the picture number, and the common event. You just have to, make sure those are updated properly. It is very much attention to detail, very, very, very much. And let's see, what's the other thing? And again, you can copy and paste whatever makes sense, just so you can save yourself a bunch of times, you just got to make sure you're consistently updating everything, right? And the nice thing about this is like when I'm down here, I can see, well, I was on picture 7 before, now I got to be on picture 8. I was on common event 147 before, now I'm going to be on 148, right? So that's helpful. Let's see, so this one has a label. We've seen puzzle one, and then we go right into the other part. This rounds out the ninth one, so the last one in this group up here, and it's not a hint. So this box is not a hint for any puzzle. And then we go down into Sudoku 2-1. So that's the next 9 squares. And you can see if puzzle 1 is on, if puzzle 2 is on, and then the regular one. Okay. And literally, folks, I'm not going to go through each one of these. It is the same thing all the way through. So all of this right here is just the same concept over and over and over again. And I'm going to go faster. There's nothing else inserted in here. Nothing. So once you get that first part done, so if I go down here to just randomly this one 7-9, so I'm all the way down to 7-9. This is the same if it's puzzle one. If it's puzzle three, it's the same. You're just updating the values. And then this is exactly the same as it was for all the previous times. You just got to update the values to make sure that you've got the right switch, the right variable, the right pixels, the right picture number. See, we're up to picture number 63, the right picture number, the right common event, right? Okay, so we just keep going down. We keep going down. We're up into the 8s now. Now we're up into the 9s. So we're going to wrap it up here. And you notice we're getting to the end of the event. So get all the way down to 9-9. Here we go. So 9-9. It is not part of any hints for any puzzles, so it's just that last part to make it clickable or show what the player selected. And then you notice wait 10 frames. So essentially, this goes through really fast. I mean, it goes through super fast. The MZ processes this super fast. You don't want it doing this 60 times a second, right? So waiting 10 frames is just a way to make it so it's not processing as much. And basically 60 frames is 1 second. So, I mean, you could increase this if you wanted to, but don't increase it too much because remember, it's cycling through this, and therefore, in theory, it is updating these every single time it cycles through. If there's no change, you're not going to see anything, right? But it has to catch when the player clicks on it, right? So don't increase this to 180 frames, which would be 3 seconds. Don't do that. Keep it under 60 frame wait. But most people will say that a 10 frame wait is a good idea. Okay, so it goes through this whole thing and then it jumps right back up to the top again and it goes right through it again. Okay, just repeats it over and over again. Okay, until something happens, until the page gets advanced. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go through all these different, I'm not going to go through every single one of those. I went through enough to show you that you can just copy, paste, update appropriately, and you have to do that 81 times. You got to do that for all 81 of these squares. And again, this is a parallel event. Now, eventually, it will go to this page when self switch B is turned on. And that's just a empty contents. It's not parallel. It's an action button. Basically, it's the way we turn this event off. So this event is actually what is essentially allowing the player to play the game for the core part of it. It's allowing them to select their squares to input values. That's what this whole event is doing. And eventually, when we go, for instance, to say solve the puzzle, then once we're done, it would turn on self switch B. So another event would turn on self switch B, and then the parallel event would stop. So this page, it would move away from this page, and then it would just stop, right? Because it's an action button, it's not running in parallel, it's not doing anything at that point. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing that is being run when we do this puzzle switch, right? The player picks puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, and a script turns on this event and this event. Okay? So, to finish up this part, I'm just going to show what the solve puzzle does. Okay? Now, what does the solve puzzle do? All right. So, this is also a parallel event, and there are 3 pages. The first page requires a condition of self switch A. So when the map loads, this doesn't start doing anything because the self switch is not on. When the self switch gets turned on by this other event, right? The player picks puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, then it turns on this self switch A, which makes this page immediately start running in parallel. What does it do first? Well, this is the one where it shows in text fields, using the text command, the rules of how you play Sudoku. So it just spells out the rules, right? That's the first thing it does. Shows a whole bunch of text, essentially telling the player how to play the game. Then what it does is it checks a conditional branch. If Sudoku hint selection is off, okay, then use the scripts to turn self switch A on for event 6, which is the timer control, and event 7, which is the score and penalty event. Okay, but it's only going to do that if Sudoku hint selection is off. And I'll explain that more when I go through in another part, the player chooses their own hints. Okay, just suffice it to say for now is that, as we were going through the example of the player picked puzzle 1, then once they pick puzzle 1, essentially it's going to turn these 2 things on, and this is going to get triggered, and it's going to show them how to play the game. And then once it's done with that text, it's going to use that script that I highlighted in part 1, but it's basically $game self switches set value. Make sure you pay attention to your capitals. And then open parentheses, open brackets, 30 is the map, 7 is the event, and then A is the self switch. So it's either A, B, C, or D, and these are in single quotes. And then true means turn it on, and false means turn it off. And then closing, here's your closing brackets here and your closing parentheses. So if the player is not choosing their own hints, then it's going to turn on these 2 events that are going to start running in parallel. And basically it turns on a timer, and it turns on this score and either a bonus and penalty thing. Else, meaning this is not off, meaning it's on, it's not going to do anything. It's not turning these on, but it's not going to do anything immediately. And the event finishes by turning on its own self switch B. Okay, so this only runs once. Turns on self switch B, which means it advances to this page. Okay, so this page would be the page with the highest condition, the highest page where the condition is met. It is parallel. So again, and I'll go back here too, there's no image, right? Player can't see this. It's below characters. Player can walk on it. All right. And then same thing here. No image. Player can walk on it. It's running in parallel. So as soon as self switch B is turned on, it moves to this page and it immediately runs the content of this page because it's running in parallel. What is it doing here? Well, all this is doing is it has a conditional branch check. First thing, if Sudoku puzzle error switch is on, then this is using that plugin TextPicture, and this is using an icon. So here under the text, /I means it's going to show an icon. And then the value of 90 is the icon it's going to show. Okay? And then it does the same thing as we previously saw. This is picture 99. There's no image because the icon is actually going to be the image. And I got to make sure I put it where I want it, right? The X and Y coordinate. Else, meaning that if Sudoku puzzle error is not on, it's off, that switch is off, then it's going to show this icon. Okay, so either way, an icon is being displayed on the screen. And it's icon number 93, and it's picture 99, because it's the same picture. You can use the same picture. And the X and Y are the same. It's going to show up in the same spot. You notice that I'm using 200% here, simply to make the icon as large as I want it to be on the screen. And then I'm using this to make this clickable. Why? Because this icon is the one that allows the player to click on it to try to solve the puzzle. Okay? If they click on this icon, right? So the plugin command, it has to identify the picture, and then it has to identify the common event 240. We'll go look at that in just a minute to wrap up this next part too. So it's calling common event 240 when they click on this picture. And then it's going to wait 10 frames, and it's just going to cycle through this. Because essentially what this does is at the bottom corner of the map, it puts an icon. Initially, it's going to be a question mark. Okay, icon number 93 is a question mark. And it puts the icon on the screen, and it makes it clickable. If they click on it, if the player clicks on it, it calls common event 240, and that's where it's going to check for errors. It's going to check for any errors in the puzzle. And then at the same time, it's going to, part of that event, common event 240, is basically it's going to turn on this switch if there's an error. And then if there's an error, because this is continuing to run, it's going to change that little question mark down in the right corner. It's going to change it to an X. So icon 90 is an X. Okay? And then eventually, so this just hangs out here until the puzzle is ultimately solved. Okay? It just keeps running through here. Eventually, self-switch C will get turned on from another event, and it will advance the page to just be empty and an action button. So the parallel process will stop running. Very similar to the puzzle setup, right? Some other event is going to turn that self-switch C on to make it stop doing this. Okay? Now, I changed my mind. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the icons, and then in part 3 of this video, I will pick up with the common event 240 for solving the puzzle and see how that works. Okay? So, if I go to my database, and if I go to my items, and if I just click on icons, it gives me my icon, all my icons. And again, I've done this in previous tutorials. I'm just going to give a shout out. All of these icons, these really cool icons, and there are a ton of them, are from a user named Avery over on rpgmakerweb.com in the forums. These are free. So Avery has made all these icons, and these are just one sheet that you can download, and then you can replace the icons in your project with this file, and you have all these icons. And how do you know which number it is? When you click on one of these icons, like remember I told you it's a question mark? When you click on it, it shows you the icon down here. It's number 93. And the X is a 90. And the check mark, which I also use, is a 91. So that event is using icon 93 to put a question mark on the bottom right corner of the screen that is clickable, that calls a common event to see if there's any errors in the puzzle, or did you solve the puzzle correctly. When you click that, if there's any errors, then that event that's running in parallel changes the icon on the screen to an X. So now it's an X. It's saying, no, you got errors. Okay. And then eventually it gets changed back to a question mark. Okay. So that's how you can pick your icons, figure out what the numbers are, and then you can use them in a whole bunch of things. So as just a quick recap, what this part mostly focused on was these two events that get turned on by the first event, the triggering event, right? This one, the player clicks on it, it initiates the game. And it also turns on self switches to get these two active. We went through this one, which basically is going through 81 squares, and it's basically saying, is this just a square that the player clicks on, right? It's a white box sometimes, but they click on it, and now it has a value. Or could it be a hint for puzzle 1 or puzzle 2 or puzzle 3? And each time you have to accommodate all the possible choices. So if this square was a hint in puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, well, actually that would be a different example, because a different event is running if you are choosing your own hints. So in this example, if square 1 was a hint in all three puzzles, you wouldn't actually have this, because the square would never be clickable. It would always be a hint. Okay. Would it hurt to have this? Right. Instead, you'd have above this, right above this here, you'd have, if Sudoku puzzle 1 is on, and then Sudoku puzzle 2, and then Sudoku puzzle 3. Would it hurt to still have this? No, it will just never do anything if this square was the hint for all of the puzzles, the way I built this. Okay, because a different event is running if you choose your own hints. All right, so this is going to be controlled by a different event. And so again, this just went through all 81, all 81 options to make these boxes either show a hint, show a white square, or show whatever the player put in. And then it just keeps running, right? It just keeps running in parallel over and over and over again until the player tries to solve the puzzle. And in which case, at some point in time, self switch B gets turned on, and then it basically moves it to this page, and it doesn't do anything. And then we did the solve puzzle, which what we saw was that this gets turned on remotely as well. We have the self switch A gets turned on, it runs in parallel. First thing it does is it shows the rules of the puzzle. How do you play? Then if you're not picking your own hints, right, because that's actually controlled over here, if you're not picking your own hints, then it's going to turn on the event 6 and 7, which activates the timer and activates the score and penalty and bonus, turns on its own self switch, right? And then it moves it to the second page in parallel. This runs continuously, and all this is doing is it's putting that question mark or that X, right? If you've tried to solve the puzzle and an error switches on, it shows the X. And if you haven't, if the error switch is not on, then it's going to show that icon question mark, and it's going to be clickable so that you can try to solve the puzzle. And again, it just runs continuously, waiting for you to do that. And then at some point in time, it gets moved to this page by something turning on self switch C, and then it's a blank. It just sits there. It's no longer running in parallel. Essentially, it turns it off. Okay. All right. So that's part B. I'm sorry. That's part 2. And then the next part will be about that common event for solving the puzzle. And then we'll pick up with any other part that needs to be talked about before we jump into the player chooses their own hints, because that is that's a separate event that's pretty long. It's doing very similar things, so it's not like a lot different, but it is there are some different nuances there. So we'll go into that in another part. Okay. All right. So again, I hope you're finding this interesting. I know these are long videos, but this is a very long eventing to do to make this Sudoku puzzle. If I hope somebody is interested enough to recreate this. Maybe you can build off it and make something cooler, make something better, make something fancier. I don't know. But anyway, if not, if you're not going to recreate this, I hope at least you get something out of this. You learn something from this. You learn how to do a concept that you can then use in something else that you want to build, and you just improve upon it or build off of it, or whatever. I hope it helps you advance your learning. So again, I'll try to get the next video up as well today. We'll see how that goes, but I'll try to do that. Uh, you know, Again, you can find me on rpgmakerweb.com in the forums. My username is the same as here, Zombie Kids Rule. You can message me over there. You can ask questions. If you find these videos helpful, or if you appreciate the effort that goes into this, making these tutorials, please consider liking, subscribing, getting notifications, leaving comments. I like to hear back from people. If you come up with new ways to do some of this stuff, or if you have suggestions or ideas, I'm happy to hear them. And I try to respond to all comments that come in. So in the meantime, folks, hope you're having a great day. It's raining here, and they've been getting flooding, but hopefully everything's wonderful. Hope you're having a great day. And until I can get the next video up, which is hopefully sometime today, happy gaming, happy game developing, and I'll talk to everyone later. Bye.